Dominican Writers Association, which also has a small press, which is the DWA Press, which publishes Dominican authors.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ibrahim Ahmad, pronouns he, his. I'm the editorial director at Akashic Books, a completely independent publisher based in Brooklyn, New York, where I have been working. I started as an intern back in 2000 and have been full-time at the company since about 2005.
I'm Chantz Erolin. He, him are my pronouns. I am editorial and production associate at Graywolf Press here in beautiful Minneapolis, and it's great to be here.
Hi, I'm Nicole Counts, pronouns she, her. I'm a senior editor at One World.
And I did see someone ask if this was being recorded, and it is being recorded. I would check in with Word Up on where it will be posted after this conversation is over. First question, and I'm actually gonna throw this one to you, Angela, as well, because you're technically next to me. And this is for everybody. So can you briefly talk about how you got into publishing and also about your work now in terms of like what you were doing, like what is the actual position you hold, and also how do you work within that system? Like what kind of structure have you created for yourself?
Well, Dominican Writers is a nonprofit organization, and we have a set of board members. We do call for manuscripts since 2016, and we have a group of people just go through the manuscripts and decide who would be the best fit for us to publish. So we probably put out a call once a year, and the last one that we published was Lorraine Avila, Malcriada, and Other Stories. And the reason why we chose her story was because it was very unique it's about 16 short stories talking about feminism, sexual assault, you know, the educational system and whatnot. And it was something that we had not published before. We have in the past published more poetry than anything else. And this was our first collection of short stories. Is there another part to your question that I missed?
No. Keep it moving. Ibrahim?
Yeah, so I have sort of a roundabout way that I entered this sphere. You know, I think unlike a lot of people who were perhaps participating in the call, you know, I had little desire or ambition to even enter publishing. It was really sort of an accident. You know, I knew the publisher at Akashic, and when he started the company around the time he started it, I thought, wow, this sounds like a cool thing. And I just wanted to be involved because it sounded interesting. I didn't have any career ambitions, and you know, it didn't even occur to me necessarily that one could make a living publishing books. And you know, it was more of a passion project and a hobby. And you know, I wasn't getting paid, and I just sort of offered to help out. And you know, I over time found that I really valued having the ability, particularly in the context of a small press, to have control over the decisions that were being made. And, you know, while I'm not, you know, I don't have a stake in the company, I don't have any equity in the company, I do have what I find to be, you know, an equal voice at the table when it comes both to, you know, editorial decisions, but also decisions that impact the, you know, the trajectory of the company. And that's something I can't really even put a, you know, dollar amount on, just that autonomy to be able to make decisions that impact, you know, not only our catalog, but also, you know, us as individuals within the office.
Nicole?
I was gonna let Chance go. Hello again, I'm Nicole. Every time I get asked this question, I always think of like the easy, the medium, or the like long version of it. I am one of those people that always knew they wanted to work in publishing. I read a book when I was 13 and just decided, you know, this is what I wanted to do. This is how I wanted to make change in the world. And I started in publishing and marketing and publicity because that's how I got into publishing, which I feel really grateful for, just because I think it gave me a better understanding of not just how an entire book is made, but how the people in this industry think of books, and then how they ultimately sell those books. So I did marketing publicity at Nation Books, which is now called Bold Type Books and Public Affairs. And then I wanted, I think, a larger say in who was being published and what topics were being published. And so I moved over to editorial. I started, so I went back to an assistant level. I started as an editorial assistant at Spiegel and Grau. I was there for, I think, 3 months before my now publisher decided to start his own imprint, which is One World, which the kind of basis of One World was that it was an imprint that started 25 years ago by Black women, and my publisher wanted to revamp it, bring it back into its kind of original thesis, which was to publish books for the entire world, not just a select few people. So I moved over to One World with him, and have been there since the beginning of the relaunch of that, and I'm still there.
Yeah, so I did not know that I wanted to be in publishing from a very young age, but started doing spoken word and hip hop in the Twin Cities kind of youth activist scene, with sort of in the same generation and cohorts as like Human Wynn and Danielle Smith. And when I went to college, I wanted to be a thinker and a writer and a poet. And my professor said, there's this internship actually at Akashic, this way for me. At Akashic, you should go apply. And I didn't really know anything about what an internship was. I didn't know what it entailed. I thought, okay, cool. I would love to do that. The work they're doing is rad. They seem rad. And I remember going home from the interview being so excited and being offered it. And I think it was actually, I think you were there, Ibrahim, and I just remember when it was kind of described, the actual time it would take and like the amount of office hours and everything. I started doing the math of train tickets and everything and not having the time to work. And I was like, oh, actually, this isn't something that I can really afford to do. And I didn't really know what internships were until after the fact. And, pretty shortly after that, for similar reasons, ended up leaving college altogether, came back to Minneapolis and was kind of just trying to be an autodidact of poetry and everything. And when Graywolf started the Citizen Literary Fellowship, which is like a sort of organization-wide program to introduce somebody who may not otherwise have access to publishing, to introduce that person to publishing, I thought, what the hell, and put in an application and came in a bit skeptically, but fell in love pretty quick. And yeah, that was in 2017. Now I work on the editorial list with our executive editor on the poetry side of things, and in sort of the production, managing editor kind of things with our associate publisher.
Thank you all. I tend to be very reactive. That's part of why I took off the video. I'm a very reactive person. I wasn't reacting badly. I'm just saying that, like, I make faces, don't realize I'm making faces. And so I was taking notes when everyone was speaking, and this is what interests me, is the dynamics of creating something for yourself, working within the system itself, right? And also not knowing what exists in terms of the potential of the professional career goal of publishing. And that's a consistent problem that we have within the industry itself. And it's been a consistent problem, is that there is not a recognition that you can make money. I will not get into numbers at this juncture, but we can. You can bring it to the Q&A, is that this is a career. This is the potential for a career, and that there are very avenues within this way to get to it, and also to stay within it, and to also have place within it to help bring some kind of, not just mentorship, but leadership, and also perspective and different ways of thinking. And for each of us, I mean, I work at a big conglomerate. There is a way in which we can get lost within the system, and we're navigating how to work within it while trying to also initiate a sort of change within it. And change for any of us can be very different, right? Like, what we perceive as change can be something as what seems as superfluous as getting more POC copy editors, which is absolutely imperative, right? Or it can be, we need to burn it down and start anew. Yeah, yeah. And I'm being kind of glib and not at the same time, because those perspectives exist. And this panel exists in the realm of trying to discuss a bit more openly, not only just our perspectives and experiences, but also some takeaways for people in terms of what is it like to work in a systemically racist system as a person who identifies who identifies as underrepresented within that system, and also how do we feel about that? Because we come to work every day, and we do this work, and we've continued to do this work for a short, long, medium, whatever amount of time. And maybe that's a very big question that I'm asking each of you to kind of try to tap into. But I want to know how you feel about being part of this system, about being part of this industry, especially now.
I'll go first. So we are a very small press, and we're not part of the big five, right? And part of the reason why we have this small press is because it's so difficult for our authors, for our minority authors, for our Latino authors to be published, to find an agent that believes in our work, who is not trying to change our work when we submit it to them, who believes in our work, and who is working with an editor who might pick up our work from a big five. It has been our experience, and that, when we have these stories that are written by people of color and they're submitted to these editors in the big five where the majority are white, the likelihood of our story being the one chosen to be published is slim. And that was one of the things that I wanted to change with our small press. Because the press is part of the Dominican Writers Association, which only publishes author of Dominican descent, it was intentional, because I am a creative artist of Dominican descent, and I was finding among my peers that they were having difficulty either self-publishing or finding an agent or finding someone from a big press who was interested in publishing their stories. So we took on that lead of helping them put their work out there. So my issue with the big five will always remain that it's just so difficult for our stories to be published without being questioned as much as they are. Whenever we write about something that that happens in the Latino community, because people don't understand it, they don't believe it actually happens. They question it. They want us to rewrite it. They want us to phrase it in a way that the white gaze will be able to understand it. And our stories are not for the white gaze. I would just tell you that right now. I could care less if white people are picking up our stories, because that's not who we're writing for. And that will always remain my issue unless the publishing industry changes, where at least we're half minority and half white, or maybe the group becomes larger, POC, then it's always going to be my issue and concern with our writers.
I guess I will jump in. Although I was listening so deeply to Angela that I kind of forgot the question. The question is, how do I
how do you feel about being part of this system,
right,
and this industry?
I mean, I not to sound like over dramatic, but I mean, it's the same question of how do I feel about being an American citizen, and in many, many ways for me. My parents are, they were professionals, but in their industry, they're from the same industry. At the time of when they started, that industry was 1% Black, and now it's only 2% Black. And so I think I was always prepared to go into an industry that was at least not majority Black, first and foremost, and then definitely not majority POC. I wasn't shocked by how many white people are in this industry. I think I was shocked by the specific kind of whiteness that sometimes embodies our industry, which feels very much so mirrored in, supremacist kind of thinking. So I mean, I am angry a lot of the times. I am frustrated most days. But the thing that I believe in more than I believe in anything else in this world really is books. And, I write on the side, and I find it's important to me to take writing classes and to be involved in kind of the writing community, because it's really important for me to never get too comfortable in, I do work in a Big Five right now. I didn't start in the Big Five, and it's just not easy, but I'm pretty dedicated, obviously, just because of also it reflects my life. I'm dedicated to publishing people from diverse backgrounds, but even that, even saying that kind of sounds crazy to me, because I'm curious about the entire world, and also my circles of people reflect the whole world. So it's not hard for me to think or imagine of publishing a person of color. What is hard for me is if I'm going to be an editor that offers money to a person of color, a disabled person, a queer person, anyone from a marginalized background, I need to make sure that not only am I the best editor from them, meaning that I can add value to their work, but that I can be the best advocate for them, especially through the Big Five houses. So, it's one thing to edit it well and to get your foot in through the door, but then you really have to stay on marketing, publicity, you really have to stay on sales, you have to stay on rights, and make sure that these books are being published in honorable ways. And it takes a lot out of you. But for me, I guess, the outcome, luckily I get to work with really incredible thinkers and artists who are changing the world and saving the world through their work. So I guess, on my most angry days, I try to call my authors more often.
I'll jump in with, just for some context, before I started at Akashic, I cut my teeth in the underground music scene here in Washington, D.C., which was very much informed by the notion that if what is right in front of you is not satisfying, you're not going to wait around for somebody to serve it up to you. You're going to do it yourself and build it yourself. And that really, I think, has informed a lot of, the sensibility that, underpins everything that we do at Akashic, from the types of books we publish to just the imperative to publish, beyond the kind of myopic way that a lot of publishing can be characterized by. And personally, I feel, and this is perhaps just because I'm in a good mood this evening, but I feel immensely optimistic about the present moment. I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time to be publishing books. And for prospective writers, I don't think that there has been such an immense variety of options available and various paths to publication available for aspiring writers. And, even looking back at the recent history of publishing, I mean, you look back not even 30 years ago, and it was a different world. I mean, publishing really was the domain strictly of straight white men in Midtown, and that has been blown wide open. Not to say that there are not immense challenges that we have to grapple with, both systemically and structurally, but also I think individually. We need to make sure we're doing the real work, each of us in our respective positions, to elevate those voices that are so frequently left by the wayside. But it's more than that. It's really valuing the craft. I don't want to be defined by the color of our author's skin. I feel like that is a reductive way. But because we're publishing for a general audience, I feel like that limits the potential audience of our writers. And so I think this is perhaps not dissimilar to the point that Nicole was making about what she sees as her mandate. But I think there's a real necessity to that. The way that we're promoting and marketing and selling books is not strictly to specific demographics. There's no reason why a good story by a person of color or by a Black person could not appeal to a white writer or a white reader rather. And so I feel like there's for all the periodic conversations around diversifying this landscape, it seems as if this moment has the potential to be transformative in a way that the previous ones have not.
Yeah, I guess in a word, my answer to the question would be conflicted. I feel conflicted about working in an industry that's so fraught, but I also think that there's, as much as for a certain period of my life, there's a learned kind of defeatism in terms of not wanting to go into something that I thought would have too many barriers, or not go into something that was too fraught to actually make substantive change in or anything. So many points in my life, I think there was a learned kind of caution, a way to say, I mean, in high school, I left my district school in Minneapolis to go to a public arts high school, and I remember very much thinking, I was a junior in high school, like, okay, where am I down to be a bunch of like, suburban and country white people, like, while I'm trying to do my writing thing, and is that going to be conducive to my creative process more than it's damaging to be in these terrible white teachers classes? And there's white teachers there too, and I thought, okay, cool, I'm gonna try it out, I'm gonna see how I can do it. And I think that I'm kind of drawing a funny parallel there, but I guess that's a little bit how I felt going into to Graywolf. Of saying, okay, cool, I can take the money and run, in this like limited fellowship thing. I can see what I can do. I can test boundaries, and there's a lot wrapped up in that where I really relate to what you're saying, Ibrahim, about the kind of DIY aesthetic of the music scene and about that. And part of the conflict, I think, for me, as a person of color entering a white industry, is acknowledging a lot of the intersections, acknowledging like that the ways in which I feel more able to navigate things and more able to like access power on levels, however kind of day-to-day or big or personal. The ways in which I do that, I think, have a lot to do with my gender conditioning, with the various ways that I feel like I have less to lose, whether right or wrong. And yeah, it's conflicting. I think there are a lot of people I know who are saying, I just got to get out. I would never tell anybody, any people of color to ever try to get into this because it's not worth it. And I can't really like say that they're wrong from where they're coming from. But
that's a great seg, actually, because I did mention that I wanted to talk about power and access to power and creating your own power, whether it is in your own organization, a smaller indie, a big five, what have you. And, I just want to kind of echo that all of publishing is a problem, not just the big five. Every entity of publishing is problematic, absolutely, to the core. And there is so much assumption or kind of a little, just kind of, we'll give you some power. We'll give you a little bit of access. I'm thinking about the ABA, the American Booksellers Association, and how they said, we'll give 4 people of color out of 13 positions on our board, as if that is parity. And that isn't parity, but it's giving 4 people out of 13 who are now BIPOC access to help make decisions, but that doesn't necessarily give them access to make decisions in itself. If that kind of juxtaposition makes sense, just because you're in the room doesn't mean something happens. You just know what happens. You might not be able to contribute to what happens. And so thinking about those power dynamics and what Chantz said of like having access to power in each of our own ways and utilizing it in each of our own ways, how do you kind of suggest people kind of tap into that? because I always worry about assistants, people at kind of like those at the most entry level place, and how much power they do have because of the knowledge they have and the access they have, but also what doesn't seem to be that supportive element, because it's like, I'm an assistant, I have to do 80 million things, I'm not paid enough, but I'm expected to do all these things, I have to deliver and I have to deliver and I have to deliver. And so yeah, I'm just going to repeat my initial question of, in terms of accessing power, what are your suggestions to people who need to recognize that they do have that in big, small ways, however we're going to do measurement? Should I call on somebody?
I'm happy to take a crack at it. I think one of the most important things somebody can do before, taking the leap into the publishing world is to take stock of what they're trying to get out of the experience and what their goals are. And I think there's while publishing is often referred to as a vocation, and I think there's something to that. I think there are differences between working for one of the big houses or working for an independent press or a nonprofit press or a university press or a literary agency. And each of these different places have corresponding structures that inform the ability for one to both acquire power, such as it is, but then run with it and do something with it. And one of the limitations, and I can speak to independent publishing I think most intelligently, but one of the challenges with indie publishing is the sheer size of these operations makes movement very difficult. And you have to think about the structures of these companies. They're largely founded by very passionate individuals who one way or another have wanted to see through their vision that they have for something. Sometimes they have benefactors or investors who are underwriting them. Other times the companies are staying in business based on nothing more than selling books and licensing rights. But all of these factors, I think, inform the experience that a new employee will have, particularly someone who might be a person of color, who has to navigate through when you have a staff of 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 people, being able to be in a management position or an executive position is a pretty tough prospect. And and I think independent publishing in a lot of ways has a bigger diversity problem than corporate publishing because of some of these structural issues. You think about something like staff retention. Indie publishing has a big problem when it comes to paying people living wages. I mean, all of publishing does, but I think some of those challenges are particularly pronounced on the independent side. So, which is why you see a lot of staff turnover and a lot of churn, because, when people, it's one thing if you're, in your early 20s and you can live on a shoestring budget and, eat ramen noodles all day and try to, eke out a living with, 11 roommates. You can maybe do that for a year or two. But, in order to keep people invested, I think publishers need to step up and realize that people are, dedicating their lives to a cause, because that oftentimes is what it is. You believe in something despite yourself, and you believe in something so passionately that you can't help but participate. And that in itself can lead to some uncomfortable, almost exploitative dynamics where, it's your very passion that is the thing that's keeping you tethered to something that might not be in your best interests economically or otherwise.
I'm just going to jump in and say, which I'll try to make very brief, just a few things, which is that right now, I do think that, I mean, you know, there's always these like blips in publishing when all of a sudden people start caring about diversity. And in these blips, I always say I don't think I can curse in this, so I'm just gonna say, you know, use this moment. But I think that all of, you know, all power in the way that I see power is collective power. And I think that, you know, my communities in publishing is the only reason I stay in publishing. It's the only reason that I've gained any sort of success. It's the only reason that my books have been upheld, you know? And I mean, I just think it's incredibly important to say that, you know, we find our power through our communities. And that, to be blunt, I mean, these companies need us more than we need them. So, you know, like, you are the expert of your life experiences. And I'm not saying that's always valued at all. I actually don't believe that a lot of these people in powerful positions, they came to this through passion. I think maybe they had passion through books, but I think that really they had passion to have some sort of power over people. And I think recognizing that, right? Like recognizing the power structures of publishing where yes, financially, and I think that's a huge part of it, but also, you know, where a person of color has to assist, you know, 2 editors, where a white assistant has to assist 1 editor. Like we really have to think about the way that we use bodies as labor and the power that we, you know, hold over these bodies. And I think that the only way to really feel like you have power is through collective power, and then hopefully through, you know, mentors and managers that, you know, can really see the value that you bring just as your person and your own life experiences.
Chantz,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. I think Nicole, what you said about realizing that, you know, these organizations need us more than we need them. Talking to a lot of people, I guess specifically younger people in New York working in publishing, describe kind of like what their jobs are and what they're getting paid and the way they're being treated and everything. It's funny to me because it's like, man, you could take that same set of skills and, you know, maybe you like love books and you wouldn't have the love of books, but you'd be like doing the same things in like some low-level tech industry thing and getting paid twice as much. And like that, I think recognition of, and I don't feel so directed with this in terms of trying to like proselytize or be prescriptive about it, but there is something about, I think, knowing worth and not letting yourself kind of be gaslighted by the industry that does factor so much in terms of, Angy, as you were saying, you know, having more people of color in the room in a significant way, and is also something very interesting but confusing and difficult for me to imagine, which would be changing the culture to the point where there's an understanding of saying that, you know, 65-year-old white man editor with inherited wealth, paying dues, making coffee, for you, that might to you feel like you were pulling up your bootstraps or whatever, but then asking these young people of color who are coming in to do something like that, it's not the same thing. And maybe that's a little bit of a aside, but yeah.
Angela, do you have anything to add?
I do not have anything to add to that question, no.
Okay. We're getting really great questions in the Q&A, so I'm keeping tabs on that. So thank y'all for submitting questions, and I encourage people to be as specific as possible also in the questions instead of being broad in the questions, because this is we have a finite amount of time and 4 people. So I just want to kind of give that kind of indicator. So I think I'm going to ask one more question. We technically started at 7:06, 7:08, and it is 7:45. So I'm being very, very mindful of time. And I do want to get to your questions because I really feel like the audience is a priority because you are also sharing time with us. And I believe a lot in access. So I think that access point is very important. So I'm just going to ask one more question and then I'm going to root through the Q&A. So I want to kind of jump off of what everyone's pretty much said from that last question is, you know, the industry needing us more than we need them. And I do believe very, very strongly in that as well. I do like a steady paycheck though, because I have an eating habit. And prior to the quarantine, I like buying shoes. I don't need them anymore. But prior to that, it was just like a nice kind of treat yourself kind of thing. But I kind of want to get into a little bit of specifics too, because like now we're talking about also being in the industry, and we're talking about our, like utilizing power and being in the spaces and being very cognizant of the spaces that we're in. So what are some situations that you learned from to achieve kind of specific goals and end results that you wanted to see? And maybe this isn't regards to equality or parity specifically, maybe more outwardly, but maybe it was kind of something that laid the groundwork, or, put the seeds in to see something grow and change, be it within your department, maybe with a managerial relationship, maybe just in terms of your own access point to where you would go next within the industry, or where you will go next in this industry, and what knowledge you're obtaining to utilize that for other people. But can you talk about something a little bit like tactical and tangible in terms of goals and end results, and what you learned from and how you kind of went about it? Can I start with Chantz? Do you mind starting, Chantz?
I'm trying to think, and maybe this is a more character flaw, but I can only go to the negative. Which I've experienced in organizations that are not just publishing.
But it's transferable, right? So
yeah,
that's valuable.
I mean, there have been various circumstances in various organizations that I've been a part of in which I feel I have been asked to contribute or vet something in, to speak in publishing terms, maybe it's kind of a sideways sensitivity reader in a type of way, and say, yo, are we going to get, how are we going to do this? And then coming in and being like, well, actually, like, this does seem bad. It does seem like y'all did a bad job. And these are the substantive things that I feel like could make it better, because I'm invested in the organization, I'm invested in the project. I still believe in the possibility that I can contribute at this point being approached. I feel like there have been circumstances under which I have tried to contribute there, and then the kind of, the fear in the room takes over and everything just gets dropped. And it says, okay, great, well, then we won't even do what we were talking about doing. We won't even try to address this because our statement was so bad, or the way we wanted to change this policy was so bad. And we'd rather just drop it after hearing this criticism than risk, actually trying something that the person they're asking who's helping, the person they're asking to help is suggesting. And that to me was a clear kind of tactical point of being like, oh, I can't actually affect change here. Or I don't feel comfortable bearing the burden of what it means to work twice as hard for half as much, or something like that. So yeah, there's the negative, because I went first. I'll think something positive later. Talk to you next week.
Jen, I'm sorry, I already asked this, but could you just quickly repeat the question again?
Sure. I tend to front load, so that's my personal problem that I need to adjust for. But what were some situations you learned from to achieve specific goals and end results you wanted to see? And that doesn't necessarily need to be to the whole like BIPOC representation thing, but even if it's just like a personal goal in the workplace and laying groundwork for something.
I'm just gonna share a positive, because I'm like Chantz, and I maybe I'm more pessimistic than I like to believe, but actually this just happened, so I'm very excited about it. Although I cannot say who the person is, but I have a list of topics / like social issues, or just like dreams I have as an editor, like the people I want to work with, who aren't specific people, but just the kind of writers I want to work with, which actually answers, someone had asked the question of what do we think about like mixed genres, so work that maybe is both fiction and nonfiction, or nonfiction and poetry. And something that I've wanted for so long was a book on Black maternal mortality rates and really Black motherhood and Black bodies, written by a Black woman. And maybe like 4 years ago, I sent an email to just friends of mine and people that I know who are writers or not in the industry, soliciting requests. And then about a year ago, I sent this kind of same email, but much more specifically targeted. And someone was recommended to me, and they ended up getting an agent, and then it came into my mailbox as a submission. And it was just like truly the most exciting, one of the most exciting moments of like, this is a dream project for me. And, you know, how lucky am I that I get to work on this? So again, like using my community to like really, you know, make sure I'm getting the kind of books that I think are important to the world. And then it's really exciting because then I get to celebrate with the community. And to the point, you know, the book is nonfiction, although there is a longer kind of short story throughout that takes on the kind of thinking about Black female patients. So, you know, this author is using both mediums to really tell the story, which is very exciting for me because I am really into literacy and like literary things. So, yeah.
Myself, I'm noticing. So when we publish an author, we work very closely with the author. They have a say on who they want to review their book, who they want to send a free copy of their book. We make a list of influencers or other folks who they're interested in receiving their book. What else? Also, we ask them, where would you want to present your book? What bookstores? What is there a particular state? Do you want to travel outside the country? We work very closely with them, even to the point of choosing who their editor is, who their book cover designer is. They have a say in it all, which I know is quite different with the big five. You know, they probably bring you drafts of what your book cover is going to look like, and you choose one, or maybe they actually choose it for you. But in our case, that is not something that we do. We like our authors to be very much involved. I know that with the last book that we published, which was Malcriada, we picked about 40 people between influencers and Instagrammers and bookstagrammers and people that we already had some sort of relationship with in the publishing community to receive a copy of the book and do a giveaway, just to bring more attention to the book. And I know that's not something that I see often and I always wonder, why is it that the big five doesn't do that? Because there's so many bookstagrammers out there reviewing books and writing about the books, whether you ask them to or not. They're out there doing the work, but big publishing houses usually don't approach them for some odd reason. It's either they get a free copy of the book through NetGalley, the website, and then that's about it. But that is the difference between us. We like to teach our writers the process of what it is to put a book together. And if they ever decide they want to do that themselves, they could go ahead and do it themselves in the future. But I guess even though we're a small press, I'm not really interested in holding all the information and not sharing it. That's not me on a personal level. That's not how I move. And with our small presses, it's the same way. I share as much information as possible. But at the end of the day, if you decide that you don't want to, publish it yourself or try to get published by big press, then we would definitely review it and be interested in doing that work for them.
And I'll say that I feel like so much of my publishing trajectory has been characterized by little acts of subversion. And I kind of, maybe my whole life has, I don't know, but I feel like, given the limited power I have, if I have an opportunity to exercise that, to, make the industry or even our own office a little more of an equitable place, I'm going to jump on that opportunity. And that that I think even the way that, say, I might look at resumes for intern candidates, if I know that a person of color is applying for the position, I'm going to give it an extra careful look. I'm going to be more proactive in engaging with communities of color about those positions in the first place. The same is true for manuscripts we might get on submission. If an author, is from the Caribbean or the greater African diaspora, you'll bet that we're all going to engage with that material and engage with it in a way that we probably wouldn't with, a writer of pallor. It's these small things that are within our grasp that are very tenable, that I think cumulatively can have an outsized impact. And even, going back to the internship example, while, on the one hand, receiving 300-400 internship queries a semester, it's tough to, even distinguish one from the next. These are all real people with real lives who are trying to achieve something. And knowing that you have the opportunity to give someone an experience that they can use to, advance their own objectives as someone who's interested in the publishing realm, I mean, that's a position of responsibility. And so I like to try to use that responsibility in a way that, creates a more equitable landscape for everybody.
Thank you for that. I'm getting to the Q&A, but I also realized I'm wondering, based on some of the questions I'm seeing, if people completely understand how at least a more generalized version of book publishing works, of if you're working in the industry versus if you are a writer submitting to be published, and how there are differences in how different publishers work. And that someone asks about Big Five, there's mid-level, there's indies, smally boutique presses, things like that. So there's a differentiation of like how different places work, whether you need to be agented or unagented, where you can submit your work to, how people look at your work. And also I think there are many, many positions in publishing. So I would also keep that into account too, because I think people don't realize how many various positions that you can hold in publishing. So also consider that in terms of like when we're speaking to power and what you can bring, and also what your interests are and all that stuff, that there are just many entities within the larger entity that you can join. And there are many, 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 many publishers, which are all a problem. Reiterate. Sorry. So I want to get to the first question. The most upvoted question is, what are your thoughts and or experiences around cultural competency counselors or trainings within the industry? Do you find these trainings and resources to be helpful or more performative? Do you think a publishing union is possible and or on the horizon? So I will repeat that because that was 4 questions in one. But A, do you feel like cultural competency counselors and trainings are helpful? Not performative? Like, you can give specifics, you can just give a generality. And also, if you want to answer this question as well, do you think a publishing union is possible or on the horizon?
I can't answer the last question. I can't answer the union question, but I can say that I have many feelings about these bias trainings and stuff, but ultimately I think it's good because I think all of us have a bias, and I think all of us are ignorant, and I think all of us can learn. So I just don't think it should stop there.
What Nicole said.
I agree.
I was just looking at the participants list to make sure my dad isn't watching, because he's actually a cultural competency trainer. No, he's not. Again, but I've never been to a cultural competency training in publishing or anywhere else. But there's something alluring to me, which might be naive. of me, of that kind of specific model versus, I guess, more of like a diversity training, whatever that means, to be trained in diversity, you know. But the cultural competency brings me back to this idea that might be romanticized. You know, I'm very green compared to all of you in terms of the years here, but this idea that that there can be a way to at least be able to step outside of one's own experience, just to understand that they're not equipped to handle it. You know, to at least be able to step outside of one's subjectivity to say, oh, I can't receive, to say maybe I'm not, but maybe my read of American Dirt isn't right, isn't you know, okay. And to kind of have that self-challenging thing, I think that there's something really interesting to me about that. Specifically, thinking about kind of the craft of editing.
Can I just say, Jen, to that, because Chantz, you did this earlier, where when you were speaking, you said something about like the power that you have, or like the, you know, difference because you're a male in this industry. And I think that's actually an example of what you just said. I think that like we should all be able to do that, is recognize, you know, our own privileges, our own biases, our own ignorance, X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean that then we can't work through them. I think acknowledging it just makes it so there's more space for everyone, you know? Not that, yeah, that's all I'll say.
Great, thank you. Publishing is inherently a gatekeeping, quotes, on purpose role. How can we reconcile that with goals and access of justice? So publishing being inherently a gatekeeping space, however you feel about that word, how can you reconcile working in it with the goals of access and justice?
I'll say that there's nothing inherently wrong with gatekeeping, whatever that really means. I mean, everything gets filtered in some way or another. The question is, who is doing that filtering? Who is doing that gatekeeping? The process of gatekeeping is one that I think is, you know, almost necessary. And when done well, I think it can be quite effective. For example, if there is, you know, an agent who happens to know my idiosyncratic tastes and serves me up manuscripts that suit, you know, exactly what my interest is, that's the basis of a really potentially you know, transformative relationship. But I think that the larger point here is that there are not enough people who are in those positions to, you know, do that filtering, to do that matchmaking, to do that gatekeeping. And that's a much bigger systemic issue. And I think if we see particular, you know, we often hear in the questions of, you know, surrounding lack of diversity in publishing or whatever, a lot of the conversation is geared toward the publishing side of things, and not as much attention, I think, is put on the makeup of literary agencies. And, you know, this is, I think, particularly important for those houses that require, you know, agents for looking at submissions in the first place. But you know, I think this is something that is going to take time and concerted effort to reconstruct, because that truly is what is required. It's such a momentous task that it involves, I think, reimagining the possibilities of who is sitting at the table and making those sorts of decisions.
I'm just going to say to Angela's point earlier, which maybe when she said it, people didn't immediately think was an explanation to gatekeeping, but I felt it when Angela was talking about the way in which, you know, she and everyone in her organization teaches her writers, you know, everything about the publishing process so that they can also go do it themselves. To me, that's part of how we remedy some of these situations, is we make it so that people have as much power as us and that they're as educated in the process as possible. So again, that goes, I think, to collective power, whether it's the authors, the agents, you know, fellow publishing people. I mean, I am someone that so deeply believes in, like, I mean, I already checked and I don't think any of my bosses are on this, but like if a book comes in and it's better for someone else, or the book comes in and they, you know, they should get an agent that, or I don't like the way the agent is talking about it. You know, I think I've hopefully built enough of a community that I can go through different channels to remedy that. Because I mean, I guess I believe that we all are gatekeepers. I mean, I guess that's my job, right, as an editor. And I mean, it's a good question. How do we hold both, you know? And I'm not really sure I have an answer for that. But I guess what I'm doing now, or what I'm trying to do now, is make sure that everyone feels as empowered as possible.
Back. Sorry. Yeah, I'll just really echo what Nicole was saying and kind of also point to, Nicole, the way you were talking about community and about building that, because I think when I first came in, I very much thought of publishing as gatekeeping in a way that was true and was not, and being like, okay, each editor is a gatekeeper to publishing. And I think that when you start to look at, you know, not even just the smaller presses, but any individual imprint or any individual editor, you know, the list is only ever so big. And there are always choices about who's going to be let in and who's going to be kept out of that list in terms of submitting or their skill. I think that something really important to acknowledging that role is really paying attention to not only who's coming in, but who's being left out, and being very critical of why and being critical of how. And even if you come up with good reasons why it's all white men on the inside of the gate and it's all not white men on the outside, even if you come up with quote unquote good reasons, you still got to acknowledge that there's something wrong there. That those good reasons might be descriptions of what's going on, but that doesn't mean it's okay. And that doesn't mean it's not your job to try to address that or to try to change that in some sort of transformative way, in whatever way you can. And Nicole, what you're saying about community just makes me think more about if, as I saw editors as being gatekeepers to publishing as an amorphous kind of like high level thing that everybody's a part of, how can we within our own specific gates actually tap into that kind of high level, big playing field of publishing? Does that make sense at all? I feel like I'm kind of getting abstract and out of it.
Makes sense to me. I was trying to figure out how I react. Like, you know how on Zoom you can react with the clapping thing? But I don't know how to do that, but that's what I was doing in my mind.
All right. I also want to speak to a question that hasn't been upvoted, because y'all deserve your questions too and to be recognized. Oh, this is kind of an editorial specific question. Editors and their assistants work really hard to craft key selling points for their titles. Those points often end up in an idolized markup. A lot of indie sales reps and booksellers complain that the key selling points are too long, and some reps remove crucial information. What is a good way to combat these complaints? So idolize is a digital arc kind of methodology. And I think the more specific question here, it sounds like, how are people actually selling books to booksellers? And that's a very important question. And so I'm kind of gonna rejigger that, if that's okay, to the person asking, because this is so specific and I don't wanna minimize it, but I kind of wanna generalize it into something that maybe everyone can understand who's watching. Is in terms of sales and to the actual interactions with booksellers, or even that other level for the editors in the room or those who are publishers in the room as well. Can you speak a little bit into how those relationships work, and if you have any idea how those work, and also in what ways that you're using, what language you are using to sell, especially BIPOC books?
Can I just say that so the key selling points that was in the question that goes on, like, you know, our title information sheets, which is the thing that all of our reps use to sell all of our books. And going back to that response of like remembering the power that you have, I have fought for every book I've ever worked on in marketing, publicity, and in editorial to make sure that we're talking about books in a certain way. And that fight's never going to end. I think there's a lot of ego that goes into a lot of, I mean, every industry, but definitely in publishing. And I think we get markups on how we talk about books and who we're saying is our target, because you know, people have different opinions, which are valid, and I think come from good places often. But I do think we have to remember that, like, we are the experts on this book, because you have to be an advocate for your book first and foremost, you know, for your authors, because, you know, they can't be in those rooms. And so, I mean, I think that's the most important part of the job, is making sure you're advocating for the book and talking about it in the way that the author would. But then I just want to say quickly, I before this Zoom had a Zoom with about 100 booksellers, so not reps, but the actual booksellers, and booksellers often get it. Like, they want to hear exactly what the book is, exactly what kind of key selling points you want. Again, going back to Angela said, like, they don't want you to whitewash it. They don't want these kind of like fake comps. They want to hear why you thought this book was special, and, you know, why you want people to read it. And I, like, it's so good to remember that. It's just so good for me to remember that when I'm in like launch season and have to write all this TI copy, and everyone's trying to, like, you know, make it sound like, I don't know, cookie cutter. And you have to remember, my publisher tells me this all the time, like, you have to remember what's special about it.
I totally agree with everything you just said once again, but I'll add that, you know, the notion specifically regarding, you know, the metadata that feeds out, and the way that, you know, bookstores are or bookstores receive this information, it's almost inherently problematic, particularly when you're, you know, the systems themselves are so reductive. And so, for example, one of the main tools that our reps and booksellers have are comp titles. And even the notion of comp titles is really problematic, because you know, if you're looking at a group of writers, for example, or an individual writer who's, you know, from an underrepresented background, the comps that you're looking at are going to follow in a, you know, the numbers are going to be impacted when they're looking at, you know, the book scan sales history of such and such author, because the only other 3 comps you can find are, you know, didn't sell well because the publishers didn't give the books the marketing dollars that they deserved. And you get into this sort of vicious cycle where, you know, you're stuck with putting up comps for your books that are necessarily second tier, and because you don't have those comps, because those voices have yet to be elevated in the conversation. And so it's really frustrating, and I know it's frustrating for authors, it's frustrating for publishers, it's definitely frustrating for booksellers. I hear this as being, you know, a source of you know, deep, you know, and even, you know, questions of shelving as well. These are, you know, these are really important decisions that get made, oftentimes without really thinking through the implications of what your BISAC codes mean, and where your books are going to get categorized in a bookstore, because that in turn might inform the audience that you're going to have for that title. But, you know, I do think that there is, and I've seen it happen, you know, you have to, and this is, I think, follows as well in the notion of a book needing an advocate. You also have to have passion, and your passion, if you can somehow, you know, what I know that I want to sign up a book when I just can't stop talking about it. And, you know, I know that based on my own sort of crazy hyper caffeinated state, I'm able to influence a few people. Maybe they will then influence a few other people. I think a lot of it is that kind of, you know, you just got to make things happen for yourself. And despite the systems, despite the architecture that is so limiting, you have to kind of overcompensate for that by your sheer willpower in a lot of ways. And also, of course, through relationships and community building, and, you know, building up a you know, a network of readers and booksellers and advocates who can champion your work, and who are willing to listen to that longer, you know, something more than an elevator pitch. I think that's really important. And you know, that, I think that's also why in-person sessions, or like, you know, rep picks nights, those types of events are so critical for being able to, you know, peel back beyond that 30-second description and really dig deeper into what makes something appealing in the first place.
Is it okay if I do one more question? Is that okay? And I don't know why I muted myself again. Okay. There was one question about how to like help booksellers and be better in that area. And I'll leave that to Veronica and team to answer it as we close out, because I think that's a very important question. However, I would say, tell the ABA to put more than 4 people on POCs on their board of staff. Step one, literally. Okay, so last question. I'm part of the creative team of a publishing company, but the only POC. Every time I pitch an idea regarding more POC content, I get turned down, but I don't want to give up. How can I continue to pitch without my colleagues being turned off by my insistence? I think that's a really interesting and relatable question. Wow, that was a way deep question to end this on, huh? I mean, I think we know what we're taking. Like, basically, this person is also worried about being tone policed, right?
Okay, I will be the one to first unmute. I mean, part of the reason I do want to, part of the reason I'm thinking about it is because I want to say something that's like as helpful as possible, because I want to make sure this person feels supported, but also
it is. It's a hard question, and that's part of why I picked it. So.
And part of my answer is like kind of fundamentally goes against what I feel, which is that capitalism is a problem, and yet you know, a lot of these people aren't going to see the value of some things unless they see it in the value of money. Although I don't think that's the answer, or that's not the answer I want to give. So I guess what I'm going to say is that when I worked on an all-white team and I felt I wasn't being listened to, I just let myself be as repetitive as needed, and I put everything in writing. I said it out loud, and then I sent emails with like long descriptions of why I felt X title was racist, or why this, you know, cover design shouldn't be like this. And I'm not saying that it always ended up good, but what I do think happened was because I sadly had to take all this extra time to write out these things, I then was starting to be included in conversations before the decisions were made. And again, that doesn't mean they necessarily always listened, but I think that was important. But I also, you know, I mean, I say this in a lot of panels, but I really do know that I am very, very privileged, because currently I work on a team with all people of color. So, which doesn't mean that there's not still issues with the other people in the building. But sadly, I feel like I've had to show a lot of evidence, I guess, of why I think something, because apparently my thought itself wasn't enough. So I had to like prove it, you know, which is exhausting, and it's tiring. And I think that's a reason a lot of people burn out. So you know, I'm hesitant to say that as an answer. You know, I guess what I want to say is, you know, please email me after this, and maybe I can support in any way. But yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to add on that one? That's cool if you don't. So thank you all for these questions. I'm so sorry I couldn't get to everyone. A lot of you answered some really, really wonderful, thoughtful, specific questions, which I really appreciate. And I hope that you can be able to reach out to, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and maybe reach out to anybody and just ask politely these questions. And I really want to thank all the panelists, Angela, Ibrahim, Chantz, Nicole, Veronica, everyone behind the scenes, in front of the camera, everything. You've been wonderful, and thank you all for spending this time with us this evening, because I know it's a lot, especially in this world right now of being isolated. So I hope that you felt supported and you felt uplifted, and you know that you are not alone if you are seeking to be in this industry or already are in this industry. Veronica, you want to take that bookmaker question, and you can tell the ABA what I said?
I'd love to tell the ABA what you said. I've had a similar thought all week, and lots more. But I did want to say that we've been wanting to have a complimentary panel of booksellers to discuss these issues. I mean, this this panel alone isn't going to do it. You know, this conversation has existed for long before this panel will continue. And it is really intertwined with what happens on the book selling end, because the book selling stuff, you know, it often gets left out of like the, you know, the publishing certificate programs and that kind of stuff, like don't really address book selling, but it's like sort of one of the main endpoints of publishing. It's the point at which it makes it public, like you're handing something literally to the public at a bookstore. And we do want to make a panel that's about that, just as like a starting point for talking. And if anybody wants to help make it, any booksellers in the room, please email me at info@wordupbooks.com. If you have any questions about anything here tonight, contact information or more links, feel free to email us at info@wordupbooks.com, and I can connect you to people. And also, if there's anything else related to this that you want to see more of that you just need a space for, then please feel free to reach out on that end too. Thank you so much to everyone who's been spending time tonight with us here. Thank you so much to Jen for just like, you know, wrangling all of this, and to Ibrahim, and to Angela, and to Nicole, and to Chantz for joining us tonight, and to all of you, and to Emmanuel and Carolina, who are here behind the scenes helping out with stuff as well. I will close out and say good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Take
Thank you all.
care.